So I am going to start with Zebra Technologies. It is a tech company. Would have to be a tech company with a cool name like that. Yet it is 50 years old.
Yes.
So for the people that don't know, describe what Zebra does.
Sure, Janet. Yeah, so Zebra Technologies develops visibility and mobility solutions to help frontline workers get their job done. So if you think about that in the form of barcode reading equipment, Android-based mobile computers, on-demand printing, and then apply it to use cases like that nurse that's administering medication bedside to make sure the right patient is getting, identify that patient and make sure the right patient's getting the right medication delivered the right way at the right time, or translate all the way over to another vertical like retail to ensure that in aisle that a modern experience can be brought to that shopper in the aisle to cross-sell and upsell between that store associate and the shopper in the store, or a courier delivering to your front door. It's using those devices to capture that information in real time and help empower that frontline worker to be the best they can be.
Although the goal and the needs and the services you provide have probably been the same of what you started out with 50 years ago, not you personally, but the company. For a company that's 50 years old, you've had to change.
Yes.
And I know that part of what you've done with automation is that you've built some things internally, but you've also made some acquisitions in AI and industrial manufacturing in the past year. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, I mean, it's really relevant to the topic today because the focus of the strategy around that Terran acquisitions, which was probably over the last 30 months, about 6 or 7 different acquisitions that were all focused in the intelligent automation space. And every one of them has been targeted at either augmenting or automating workflows. So as an example, we acquired Fetch Robotics in the second half of last year based in San Jose that makes autonomous mobile robots to collaboratively engage with workers in a warehouse for picking applications. We acquired Reflexis in late 2020, which is really focused on providing task and labor scheduling to be able to more dynamically allocate that labor pool in a way that can meet the dynamic demands that our customers are seeing. And is where we talk about often this shift of the production and provision of products and services ever closer to the point of demand. The idea that I can get what I want, when I want, and how I want it delivered is really creating, I would say, diminished predictability in our customers' environments, and they need to act and move in real time. And so a lot of our acquisitions have been either doing that physically or doing that digitally with digital decisioning type capabilities.
Sachin, Groupon, and you have joined Groupon very recently, is a much younger company. It started in 2008. We all know what Groupon does. So you were digital from the beginning, but yet the company is transforming, and you actually have an announcement timed with this summit. What are you announcing?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of new things happening at Groupon. We've had a new CEO, and I've joined recently. So we've been doing a lot of tech innovations, and essentially there are a lot of things that are happening in Groupon, and you know what Groupon is. It's basically a two-sided marketplace, and as a result of that, there is a merchant and a consumer side of things, and we are basically trying to get our technology to become more forward-facing. And obviously it's a new company, but it's still been around over a decade, and so things add up. And so we are trying to make things faster, smarter. We've had a lot of machine learning microservices that we are actually consolidating and upgrading the technology. So there's an announcement that's coming up that's going to talk about our business update, and along with that, how we are making changes to the technology.
Gary, you have been at Purdue for more than 30 years. So I'm sure when you started your teaching career 30 years ago, you weren't even thinking about the things that we are discussing today, or maybe you were, but definitely not the rest of us. So let's talk about how AI is enhancing the student experience, because one thing we know, we need more students coming through the pipeline who are savvy and comfortable with these technologies.
Yeah, well, I'd like to start off by saying it's a good thing this is a 3-hour-long panel, because there's a lot going on. Especially at Purdue, we have totally embraced what we call the digital transformation of learning, both online and residential, and that's part of my role there. And we've recognized that we really have to catch up in what's going on. And we're actually using business and industry as a model. So you hear about digital twins. Well, think about you as a learner having a digital twin. and being predictive on how you learn, the way you learn, what you like to do, what you don't like to do, and then matching that with the learning outcome. So that's an example of one. Predictive maintenance, okay, is another one. So you're struggling in a course. You may not even know you're struggling in the course because of the way you're going through the materials. That being much more predictive, so it will then allow the instructor or you to get a message basically saying you really need to review this piece, or you need to go to your instructor. And instruction now becomes much more personalized. And that's really what we're looking at. We are looking at totally transforming the learning experience, throwing everything out the window, because we actually know that a lot of what has been done for the last 1,000 years in higher education, which is pretty much the lecture, isn't as effective as something that's called active learning. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of studies that say that active learning is much better than lectures. And that's what we're basing it on. How do we create an active learning experience for every student? Now, some students may want a little bit of lecture, and that's fine, but we will know that beforehand because we have your digital twin.
And by the way, we want to point out that digital twin is not going to do your reading for you. So that student or that child that you're paying that tuition to, they will still have to do their reading. So in the case of clients, the students, of course, are your client that you're trying to improve the experience. Tom and Sachin, I want to ask about how you are using AI to seamlessly improve your customer experience, because we're dealing with a huge customer base. So Tom, you first.
Yeah, sure. The digital twin's a popular one, and I guess one of the things that I'm taking away from this as well, from locomotives to patients to students, we're talking about digital twins. But being able to understand what's happening in a workflow across the network. So if you think about a retailer that maybe has 800 locations, and as one of our customer executives said to us recently, the store is turned into a fulfillment center that it just so happens people also shop in. Right? So it's really turned the model completely upside down, because fulfillment now is happening from those store environments. So you have the stochastics of how do I manage the inventory, the people, the product, the capital assets, and treat those stores as fulfillment centers, as warehouses, but also having in-person shoppers coming in as well. And as many alluded to earlier, the complexity of that, the permutations just aren't possible to do manually. So we're collecting and looking at a lot of that data, what orders are coming in, what orders are predicted to come in, where is inventory located, what's the distance between the orders coming in and those orders to be shipped to, in order to optimize shipping costs. So looking at all of that data and using it to better plan inventory and the labor equation. And what we're really seeing, Janet, is the notion of, as we like to say, planning systems and execution systems are collapsing on top of one another. And what I mean by that is, if you think about planning, you typically have a plan and then you execute the plan, right, for days, the coming days, or for a week. And what's happened is those planning cycles have become shorter and shorter, because as we order, for instance, online, or we have the expectation that we can get a medical service in a telehealth type fashion like was discussed earlier, the distance or the time between when you initiate that order or that experience and it actually being delivered is getting closer and closer to zero, right? It's going from days to hours to minutes. And so what is a plan in a world where from the time I order to the time it's delivered is minutes? It's obsolete before it starts. And so collecting that data, understanding what's happening in real time, where are my people, where's my inventory, where's my assets, and then orchestrating all of that in real time is really where we're going. So we think the idea of kind of planning is going away, and it's now the idea of kind of agile unfolding of the workflow in real time. And to do that, you have to have a massive amount of predictability. And the only way to get that predictability, as we heard earlier, is to use these AI and machine learning models to look at what's happening in the near past and then extrapolate that out into the future. So that's an area that we're driving. And it's extraordinarily important for our retail customers, because if you think about retention and empathy for that frontline worker, retaining that staff is critical for them, and having a better work experience is what it delivers.
Yeah, trying to achieve predictability in an unpredictable world. And Sachin, for Groupon, when you're dealing with a variety of different retail and services, and that space can be really unpredictable, really fickle, because it's hard to know what the customer wants. Sometimes they don't even know what they want. So as you're managing so many different retailers and you're trying to connect them with the customers across all these retail verticals, how are you using AI?
Yeah, and Janet, as you said earlier, I just recently joined Groupon, and it being a two-sided marketplace is, yeah, and the sheer amount of innovation that you can do, I almost feel like kid in a candy store with what I can do with AI and ML. And again, like like when you have a marketplace, you got millions of customers on one side and thousands of merchants on the other side. It's a matching problem, right? You're basically trying to find and show the user the best thing that they would be interested in, at the right time with the right incentive. And so on the consumer side, it's about, trying to figure out, and as you said, Janet, like, sometimes the customer doesn't even know what they want, right? And so you go to a nail salon and you want to get your nails done, and we'll be like, oh, by the way, there is a pizza place right next to your place, which is also offering a Groupon. And so how do you predictably figure out packaging? How do you come up with interesting product offerings for your customers that could be of interest to them? So there are enough things like this we can do. And on the merchant side, again, we have a sales team whose job is to go and close merchants. But again, we can call anybody. So how do you figure out, of all the merchants in the world, which ones to call, right? So again, even before our customers know that they would be interested in something, we have to predictably figure out what would sell. And so we actually have a program that actually qualifies leads that we feed to our sales team. And that sales team actually goes out and then makes those calls. And then we get the feedback from them saying, okay, these worked, these didn't work. And we track their progress through the life cycle of a merchant. So essentially, there is a whole lot of work that we can do on that side. And even through the life cycle of a merchant, how good they are whether our customers are having any issues with them or not, is all the thing that goes back into the feedback loop of our system. So essentially, both on the consumer and the merchant side, we have these feedback loops that feed into our system, and that basically helps us predict, how we can do other things for them.
Which is interesting. I'm glad you shared that, because a lot of us wonder, how do you measure the outcomes of these technologies? Gary, I have a bunch of questions for you. First of all, as we roll out all these technologies, and I had asked Catherine about this, everyone's finding a hard time hiring the people to do this. So first of all, how can we attract more students into that pipeline of things like data analytics, data scientists? And we have a great question from our audience that you have described how you can more accurately predict a great way for a student to learn individually, but how do you measure that engagement and success?
Well, I'll take your first question. We have to start with K through 12. K through 12, I'm too old to be kind, I guess. I'm going to be blunt. It's broke in this country in many cases. There's islands of excellence, and probably your kids are going to them, but there's a lot of K through 12 that really needs to be fixed. Purdue has been active in this. I led an initiative where we created what we call the Purdue Polytechnic Institutes. We put them in the inner cities of Indianapolis, South Bend, and we're expanding them outward. And Polytechnic means that it's really focused on the STEM disciplines, but more importantly, it's all active learning. And so we find the learner's passion. You'd be surprised how students who have struggled in the first 8 years suddenly blossom and flourish, okay? And that's what we have to do, is we have to experiment, be bold, and actually go out and do something and help our K-12 system do the right thing. The second question on ensuring and measuring engagement, one of the projects I'm leading at Purdue is the classroom of the future. What is the classroom of the future look like? And part of it is there's lots of sensors in there, whether it's cameras or eye tracking movements or whatever. And that's how you can actually measure engagement, is by what is the person actually doing during the session. The other thing is, as I've mentioned quickly with K through 12, is we are trying to create passion projects, open-ended projects that students get really, really excited about. So now they become self-motivated. that is a very engaged learner. And so it's both what we ask them to do and then measuring and looking at what they're doing and then creating interventions so that we ensure that there's the engagement that we want and the learning that's going on. This is so exciting.
Absolutely.
And by the way, the students that do go through these programs, they get a pretty nice paycheck at the end when they graduate. And I see this because every single CEO I have interviewed, they've talked about the need to hire more people, and then they're talking about the money that they are paying these people now. I want to ask you, Tom, what is your workforce size now at Zebra?
We have about 10,000 employees globally.
Okay. Are you using AI to attract more people to come work at Zebra? And if so, how are you doing that?
We are. We've started to accelerate an initiative around that just really over the last year. And I think many have started to look at various types of tools to do that. And you could sort of think of it as intelligent screening is a way that we're looking at that. So using a number of different SaaS packages out there, digitizing kind of our job descriptions, keywords, specifics around those job descriptions, and then using that to, first of all, cast a wider net. I think, the days of candidates coming to you and finding you, particularly, and maybe a number of folks in this room are dealing with this, particularly in a situation where, as you mentioned, Janet, we've been around for 50 years, so we're really well known for visibility, mobility, barcode reading, RFID, Android mobile computing, but when you think robotics, or you think AI, or you think ML, those are emerging areas for us. They're maybe, sub 10% of our business, but growing really rapidly, and we need to be able to attract that talent. So casting that net becomes really important, doing that more intelligently and using some of those SaaS tools to be able to do that using AI, as well as being able to do the screening. Again, I think many folks, and I mentioned examples earlier, pointed to the challenges with manually doing this at scale just doesn't work. And so being able to apply those filters in an automated fashion is a big help as well.
So again, for those who were not so familiar with Zebra, it is a big, big company, 10,000 employees, doing $7 billion in annual sales. Yep. So monster company. Sachin, again, we are so grateful that you joined us because he is brand new at Groupon, yet a company that started in 2008 still needs to transform, and massively. So I want to ask you, you were brought in to sort of take the next step in your digital revolution. How do you merge seamlessly the platforms, the automation platforms that are there now, and what you're hoping to do? That's a big ask.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a fun one too. So that's why
until it crashes. I'm only kidding.
So look, I mean, our technology is fairly modern. 10 years is, well, I mean, you can look at both ways. 10 years is a long time in digital world, but relatively speaking, it's fairly modern. And so, and we've been engineering it for a while. And so, like any other place, you incur tech debt. You build stuff and then, it gets older and then you build more things on top of it. So one of the things that I'm looking to do is basically just transform that. We're in the middle of doing a cloud migration. So basically moving everything from on-prem to cloud so that we can use more cloud native technologies and things like that, both on Google and Amazon. So that's one big thing that we'll be able to do. I think generally speaking, like I said, we have done enough work on AI and ML on both the customer side and the merchant side. We're looking to, make it better by improving all of that stuff. Technology has come long ways, 10, 20 years ago, we used to have neural networks, which was basically just teaching a computer how to learn, and by giving them some rules and having them learn over things that you've seen in the past. And now there are things like deep learning, which is beyond that, where you don't even need to learn. The machine learns to learn. And then that's actually a very interesting concept, like self-driving cars and things like that work on those things. So I'm actually thinking, there are a lot of things that we can build in our company, even like the search and relevance, it's run on AI and ML. But again, you can go deeper on that. Even when you type a search, it goes into an n-dimensional space, and you can find the distance between relevant things in that. So, I mean, I can just go on and on about the things we can do, but yeah, there is so much work we can do, like look-alike modeling. People who look like this behave that way in the psychographic way. So we can figure those things out, and we can actually start to show more relevant things to people, and that just means that more people can find what they're looking for, more merchants can have better business, and then we have a thriving marketplace.
I have a quick metaphor about how we have to adopt to technology, then pretty soon you cannot live without it. I was reminded at a past conversation, people used to be terrified of elevators. They thought, I can't trust this. Well, I happened to check into a hotel last night that did not have working elevators. And I said, I really want to trust those elevators. And I really couldn't live without it as I was dragging my bag up 16 floors. Gary, I want to ask you a question. We were talking about enhancing the student experience now. Can you give us a quick comment, because we're down to our last few minutes? What are the roles that we're going to need to fill in the future as every company across every industry has to adopt automation? We know about data scientists. What are the roles we need to fill? What do we need more of?
Well, I think that the new foundations, reading, writing, and arithmetic, when K through 12 was invented in higher ed in 1900, around 1900, that's the system we're trying to change. Right now, it's about what we call the digital transformation technologies. That's artificial intelligence, data and data analytics, cloud computing, AR and VR, some of these emerging tools. These are transformational tools. You just need to really look at this very, very carefully. We're at a place in human history unlike any other where machines are smarter than people. So what separates us from the machines? That's what education needs to focus on. It's the creativity, it's the humanity, it's those kinds of things that are going to separate us from the machines as we continue to automate more and more. And that's part of that transformation. So it's not just learning about those transformation technologies, it's also really preparing graduates that are much more creative, open-minded, motivated with the humanity that goes along with it. And that actually is a very bright future rather than a dark one. And that's the way I view the world.
I want one more quick question for each of you, because Sachin and Tom, you're both CTOs of your companies, but the role of a chief technology officer 10 years ago was very different than what you have to deal with now. So 30 seconds each, how do you upscale yourself to learn the latest technologies that you will have to adapt?
Yeah, sure. Well, real quick, I think we're always looking at the gap between the art of possible and what's valuable in the market. And so what's valuable in the market is largely unchanging, but the way you address what's valuable is always changing from a technology perspective. And we're saying, hey, how do we close that gap? And that sort of leads us, Janet, to where are the places we need to learn and just say, hey, we've got to jump in. As you heard from some of the other panelists, just get started, move forward, take the first steps, get some wins, and then kind of keep moving from there. So it is much more exploratory than certainly it was a decade ago.
And Sachin, you were brought in as a tech expert, but even you probably have to upscale yourself on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think, look, the trick for me and for a company like ours where we're actually dealing with consumers who are unpredictable is experimentation. So essentially, it's all about how do you build and try new things and then basically show it to the customer in an experimental way. So we have mechanisms to do something and make sure that things don't crash, and continue to adapt and iterate from there. So for me, it's experimentation.